I'm Chaplain Jacob Scott of the Oregon National Guard. This is the Hope in the Trenches podcast. Where going forward, I'll sit down for conversations with people who offer interesting and informative perspectives on finding strength for life and work in the trenches, and even improving our spiritual posture. Whether you feel like you're under heavy bombardment or ready to go over the top toward a new objective, it's good to be with you. Welcome to the Hope in the Trenches podcast. Our guest on today's episode is Dr. Paul White. Dr. White's a psychologist, speaker, and leadership trainer who makes work relationships work. For that reason, with his focus on developing healthy workplace relationships, I believe we can call him a thought leader in the area of work relationships and organizational culture. He's written articles and been interviewed by Bloomberg's Businessweek, CNN, Fortune.com, Entrepreneur.com, Fast Company, Fortune, FoxBusiness.com, U.S. News and World Report, The Washington Post, and Yahoo Finance. Dr. White is the co-author of the best-selling 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace, co-written with Dr. Gary Chapman, the author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, The 5 Love Languages. I know a lot of our listeners are familiar with that work. That's the book that introduced me to Dr. White's work because they're both curricula that we use with the Strong Bonds programs in the military, providing personal and relationship enrichment opportunities for our service members. 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace has sold over 500,000 copies and been translated into 27 languages. Based on their extensive interview and expertise, Dr. White and Dr. Chapman developed practical ways for leaders and employees to communicate authentic appreciation that leads to increased employee engagement, lower staff turnover, more positive work environments, and higher profitability. As a speaker and trainer, Dr. White has taught around the world in North America, Europe, South America, Asia, and the Caribbean. His expertise has been requested by numerous multinational Fortune 500 companies and faith-based organizations. Dr. White and his wife, Kathy, have been married for over 40 years. They have 4 adult children and numerous grandchildren. One of his sons is an Army chaplain, whom I've since had the pleasure of meeting at a symposium for chaplains. Now, we recorded this episode a few months ago, but my prayer is that it gives you some food for thought as we head into 2022. May you all have a blessed new year. Dr. White, thanks so much for being here with us today on Hope in the Trenches.
My pleasure, Chaplain Scott. I'm glad to be with you.
So, Dr. White, tell us a little bit more about your origin story. What was the journey that led you to your career teaching and coaching organizations toward healthy cultures?
So I grew up outside Kansas City in the context of a family-owned business that my father and grandfather and mother actually started, and sort of lived through that and generational transfer and all that kind of stuff. And then I wound up becoming a psychologist and done a variety of things, including evaluating students who have learning difficulties and that kind of thing. But around 2000 or a little before, I was approached by some business consultants that knew of my background, and they had kept running into family issues because 85% of all the companies in the U.S. are family owned. And so I started consulting with them and their clients initially just around relational difficulties, father and son or 2 brothers or something like that. And then moved into business succession planning about who's going to own it and manage it across generations. And in the midst of that, I was working with a family business in North Carolina, and I was asking the dad and the CEO how things were going as far as the succession plan. He said, I think it's going pretty well. My son's stepping up and it's going to go okay. I walked across the hall to the son, asking the same question. He said, this is a disaster. It's never going to work. I can't ever please my dad. And so they were at different spots. And at the same time, my wife and I were rereading, actually, The 5 Love Languages by Dr. Chapman. And I thought, I wonder if these concepts might work or apply in work relationships. So I actually pursued him for a year and wound up meeting with him and pitched the idea of developing an online assessment, which we did and gone well, and then started doing some training, and then wound up writing the book together called The 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace. And over time, then that's sort of taken more and more of my time and energy of trying to help create positive workplaces.
Well, that's fascinating, and I know that a lot of our listeners are likely familiar with the book, The 5 Love Languages by Dr. Gary Chapman. And so the assessment that you mentioned, I believe you call it the Motivating by Appreciation Inventory, the MBA inventory.
Right. Yeah. And so what we did is first we, said, well, okay, obviously we can't use 5 love languages in work-based relationships. And so agreed that probably the most corollary concept would be appreciation. So we agreed on that. And then I started translating sort of what each of the love languages look like in daily life and created this assessment. And it's actually the same 5 languages in name, but they obviously look different in the workplace. And we've been fortunate. We had, 280,000 people have taken our assessment. It's in a number of languages, and have created different versions, both for different settings. Actually, we have a military version because, like quality time can be a little bit of a challenge in the military around fraternization, and so adjusted it that way, and also gift giving. So gone from there.
Yeah, absolutely. There are regulations and different things that govern some of what we call our left and right limits in the military, or the curbs for how we behave. And certainly there are probably some cultural distinctions and things that are common to the military that might not be as common in civilian workplaces. I think we probably occupy a unique position in the National Guard and the reserve components with having a civilian occupation as well as the military vocation too. So in the book, Appreciation at Work, or the 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace, you share a lot of statistics on job satisfaction and why people leave organizations. And really, I think that gets at your big idea, or how you set up the big idea of appreciation. What has that research demonstrated, and how did that fit together?
Well, I came in the side door to this whole field as a psychologist, not as an HR person or even an organizational, leader or development person. And so when I came in, I learned that, there's a lot of employee recognition programs. I mean, 90% of all companies have some form of employee recognition. But what we were finding is that they weren't working in the sense of not, they recognized people for performance, but they didn't really create positive morale or anything. And so started to find out there's a whole bunch of research out there that, relates people feeling valued and appreciated to job satisfaction. But even more importantly that, I mean, it's fine. We want people to enjoy their work, but, work is work. It's not always enjoyable. And more importantly, there's a set of research. We have over 50 research citations in our chapter on return of investment for organizations that show that when team members feel valued and appreciated, absenteeism goes down, tardiness goes down, following rules and procedures goes up, staff morale goes up, customer service ratings go up. In the private sector, productivity goes up, profitability goes up, managers enjoy their work more, conflict goes down. So really the focus is not so much on, making people feel good. I mean, I'm a boomer myself, and I'm sort of like, yeah, you got to work. I have plenty of employers say, I don't really care how they feel about it. They just need to get done. But it's sort of like oil in a machine. I mean, if you have a machine and you don't have any oil, it sticks, it creates heat, tension, sparks, sticks, just gets stuck. And really appreciation helps organizations and departments and teams work together better with a greater effectiveness. And that's really become the goal. And we're able to demonstrate that that's what happens. And so over the 10 plus years now that our book's been out, it continues to grow, which is unusual for a book. I mean, we sell more books every year than than prior. Most business books sell 3,000 copies in their lifetime. We're selling 3,000 to 4,000 a month currently. Sold 500,000. So something's working, and I think it is that when team members feel valued authentically, good things follow.
Certainly, that idea resonates well with me as a chaplain too, and in the Army, we have the philosophy of people first, and winning matters. Of course, the recognition that we can't win and we can't accomplish our mission without our people.
Mm-hmm.
But now, of course, I've spent most of my adult life in the combat arms units of the military, and this is a volunteer organization. I mean, really, of course, any place of employment is volunteer. It's perhaps a little bit different in what people are volunteering for when they join the military. But some of my friends and colleagues might be thinking, are you suggesting that we have to coddle our soldiers or airmen, or is this, something blowing smoke is a way that we might describe it in the military? Is this just about making people feel good?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. I mean, and that's sort of my point. I mean, if people have a positive response and feel valued, that's good, but that's not really our goal. We want to help teams work together effectively with less conflict, and versus sort of cracking the whip and they only do stuff when there's threat of some kind of punishment. I mean, employee engagement's a big sort of term, and it's practically it means that if you're not engaged, you're there physically but not mentally or emotionally. You're just sort of going through the motions. And we know in the private sector, only about less than 20% of the workforce is actually engaged. And I want to mention, I mean, we've worked with literally every branch of the military, including the Coast Guard and Air National Guard and reserves and all that. And it's an important issue for a lot of reasons, including even some extra ones we can touch on about, being together as a team and feeling supported as a team. So it's not just going through the motions. And I got to say, I mean, I worked with one group that, I know about awards and performance awards and that kind of stuff. And, one commander basically told his team, write out, why I should give you an award and sort of commend yourself. And they did, and they got the award. I mean, it's virtually meaningless for them as far as from getting any actual accommodations or, from or praise from their supervisor. So we're not about just going through the motions or making it look like you value, appreciate somebody. We focus really intently on authentic appreciation and genuineness.
So maybe let's get kind of down into the nuts and bolts of this type of positive employee engagement that you're talking about. What does that look like for what we call a first line leader or a supervisor to make appreciation a genuine part of their engagement with their people?
Yeah. So I think an important point is to differentiate between employee recognition and, for us, authentic appreciation. Recognition has a long history in the workforce in the United States and other places. And recognition, when it's designed well and implemented consistently, does a good thing. It's basically around performance. You're recognizing and potentially rewarding somebody who's done their job well or even above and beyond. They've reached certain target goals. They're demonstrating the behaviors that you want to see from that position, whether that's, a receptionist or somebody that, greets somebody cheerfully, or whether it's, somebody getting their reports and paperwork done in and on time, completing tasks and so forth. That's good stuff. But what we've found in the workplace is that most recognition occurs mainly to the top 10 or 15% in any unit or department. And often they sort of repeatedly get the recognition. So you got this big middle group of 50 to 60% of team members who just don't ever hear anything, and they're good people and they're solid and they put forth good effort. They're just not your stars. And we know that 79% of the people who leave their job voluntarily cite a lack of appreciation as one of the key reasons for leaving. Most managers think people leave for more money. It's not the case. They may get more money, but that's not what drove them to leave. And so we really focus and feel appreciation is about the person. That, I come from a Christian worldview and believe that we're created and we have value because we're created in the image of God and by Him and for a purpose. And so it's not all about work. I mean, yeah, we got to do our work and it's good to get recognized for that. But for those people who aren't the stars, they still bring value. And also there are times in our lives where we're not at the top of our game. I mean, I have twin sons that are now adults, but the first 2 years were, the closest thing to hell I want to experience as far as sleep deprivation. And I was not, the best in my unit. But I still I still needed support, and some encouragement. And so there are times and places where we can communicate value about the person, even though they may not be performing at the top level.
I think that's really such an important idea, and more than just outputs, because it is, isn't it? It's about valuing the individuals on our team or in our organization as people, as human beings, more than simply their outputs.
Yeah, and let me give you an example of, there's some characteristics that we have, some of us at least, that are valuable, but they don't necessarily show up on the performance checklist, right? I mean, I personally prefer to work with cheerful people more than grumpy people or complainers. The grumbly ones may be better performers, but I'm going to pick a cheerful, moderate performer over a high-performing jerk, that's negative all the time. And so there are things like that, or sometimes it's even outside of work. I mean, somebody that's training for a marathon or triathlon, and you say, man, Dave, that is so cool that you've got the discipline to train for that. I'm really just impressed with that. Or maybe a single mom who just is really committed to her kids. And you say, Maria, man, I'm so jazzed about how committed you are to your kids and how you love them. And it doesn't have anything to do about work, but it's about their value as a person. And that's going to create a connectiveness, even a sense of loyalty from them to either you or the organization.
So that, and from reading the book, that specificity is really important to the idea of appreciation, isn't it? It's more than just saying, hey, good job. See you next. See you tomorrow morning, or see you next drill.
Yeah, we actually have 96,000 people on our newsletter list, and we'll do polls occasionally. And one time we asked, what don't you like to hear? And good job is one of those things, because it's too vague, it's general, it doesn't really take any time or energy to think about. You can say it to anybody, and I've had technical people say, my boss wouldn't even know if I'm doing a good job. They may manage me, but they don't know my technical skills. And so we really teach you need to be specific. And I think the other thing that kicks in here is that most leaders, when they hear about appreciation, they think about words, right? That you're going to tell them thanks or, good job. And our research shows that over half of the workforce have a language different than words as the primary way that they want to be shown appreciation. So if you only use words, even if you're doing it great, you're missing half of your team or more in how they want to be shown appreciation. That's sort of a core concept that not everybody feels appreciated in the same ways. But words, you got to be specific. You use their name, tell them specifically what you value and why it's important. And the more specific you are, the more likely they're going to view it as being genuine.
So you've got to really, as a leader, you've got to have more than one tool in your kit.
If you want to, encourage your team, I think so. Yep. And that's really our inventory. People ask me all the time. I just had another podcast interview, and they said, what do you do if you don't know their language? Well, asking somebody, if you want to be appreciated or show appreciation, what should I do? That's a weird conversation in our culture. And you're not going to get much. You're going to say, I don't know, tell me thanks, and that's about it. But so the inventory that we created in this online thing, it takes about 10 or 15 minutes. And it identifies the languages that people value, but also the actions within the language. And we discovered this along the way that, for example, quality time, it doesn't necessarily mean that they want time with you if you're their supervisor or manager. In fact, I tell older leaders, I said, just because you have a team member who has quality time as their language doesn't mean they want time with you. You may be great or wonderful, but younger employees more want to hang out with their colleagues and peers and go out to lunch or go out after work and maybe watch sports together. So we allow people to choose not only the language, but the actions and from whom they want those actions.
Yeah, there's a little bit of an art to that too. I guess as I've become more senior and as a chaplain too, kind of knowing when to disengage and when I've sort of made my points and the value is there and not staying around too long.
Right.
But now in the military, we used to use a term, I think, at least in my experience, and this could be or maybe a representative bias too, but we used to use the term followership to talk about how a person is led. Now, I believe, of course, I've been doing this for a long time, so I believe that military service has incredible purpose and meaning. But sometimes maybe our soldiers and airmen or other service members in other branches might have a hard time seeing the significance of the work that they're doing day to day. So how can leaders inspire their people to understand the purpose and meaning of their calling? And then, well, really on the flip side of that, how might an individual service member find meaning or purpose if their supervisor or first line leader doesn't seem to inspire them?
Yeah. Well, that's actually a pretty deep question, isn't it? I mean, it's really about what's the purpose and meaning of our life and how does that play out in our vocation and career. And, if you don't understand and accept that we're created and we have a creator and that there's purposes for which we've been created, one, to have a relationship with him and bring him honor and glory, as well as to use the gifts he's given us for good, for the community, and to love others. If you don't have that, it's sort of hard to find purpose and meaning at your work. I mean, the whole book of Ecclesiastes is about that, right? I mean, He did everything and accomplished everything, and he said, it's all sort of just smoke and mirrors, and it goes away. And so there's that part. But I think at a practical level, I know my dad in the manufacturing that we did, he would make sure that each person, because it was a factory and they, put parts together and they glued stuff and boxed stuff up, that he helped them understand how their task related to the bigger product and why it was important. And I think in the military, it's important in some ways. You can almost go at it from a backwards point of view of saying, here's what would happen if we didn't do what we do in this unit, or if you don't do this, let's just follow this down. If you don't get the forms done correctly for this person's transfer or whatever it might be, then it creates, at least a delay. And then, you sort of walk it down and you can see it doesn't take too much to get there, that all of a sudden a whole bunch of things are screwed up and a whole bunch of people are impacted. And, especially if I think about mechanical kinds of things that, because one of my sons is a chaplain in the reserves now for the Army, but he was active and was in a maintenance for vehicles. If you don't do it right and, you're in your truck or your tank and it breaks down, you're putting people's lives at risk. So I think you've got to both call to help them understand how their specifics relate to the bigger goal and purpose. But then I think there's an issue that helping people see that they have value even beyond work, right? Because work is not the totality of our life. And I know for my wife, who for a number of years was a stay-at-home mom, and now we're in our 60s, and she's like, what do I give my life for? Well, we've got 4 incredible kids who are married, have grandkids, doing well, and she molded and impacted them. But you have to sometimes help people remember and see what they're doing and the value it brings to other people.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And now, it was interesting as I read the book and realizing that well, I think the latest edition was published in 2019, and
Right. Mm-hmm.
so this is pre-pandemic, pre-COVID,
Right.
and before a lot of people started teleworking. Before we started recording, we were talking about this just a little bit, but you point out some research and or maybe the big idea, and you've done some research since that. It can be even more difficult to express appreciation to people when you don't see them regularly,
Mm-hmm.
and it may be even more tempting to reduce them simply to their outputs, but to reduce them simply to what they provide for you rather than their value as a person.
Yeah. So actually, in 2018, before COVID, obviously, we did research because we have a version of our inventory that is for remote and long distance workers, because a lot of multinational and just organizations have people in different cities or states or whatever in countries. And so we wanted to find out, do people who work remotely want to be shown appreciation differently, or is it pretty much the same? And largely the patterns were the same in that words was the most frequently identified as the preferred way. Quality time is second, acts of service is third, tangible gifts is fourth, and then physical touch is a whole separate thing that we can talk about if we want. But we found that quality time sort of pops up more for people who are working remotely, which makes sense. It's still second, but it's higher. But more importantly, we found sort of 3 pieces that need to be in place for it to work. One is you have to be proactive when somebody's working remotely, because you don't see them. I mean, you don't walk by their office and stick your head in, or you don't see them in the break room or coming in to work in the morning. And so you don't have those sort of chance encounters where you might chat and so forth. And so if you don't reach out to them, whether by phone or text or video, it just doesn't happen. And so you've got to be proactive. Secondly, sort of tying into what I said before, it's not all about you as a supervisor, that we want to keep your team members connected. And so we talk about, in addition to being proactive, you have focus on their peers and try to establish ways for the team to talk together. And I know during COVID, my team was remote, and so we would have sort of team meetings and just have times to chat. And that's the third P that we came up with, personal, is that if you need to sort of set aside times to talk about just life, because it's not like you show up 5 minutes early to a meeting and you chat, to the person next to you and say, what'd you think about the All-Star game, or, whatever, a sporting event, or what are your kids doing? We don't have that. And in remote settings, it's the communication is very task oriented. It's like, okay, we're going to go over this budget. We've got this, project we're working on, and there's not sort of this time for informal chit chat. And that's where people sort of just, I would say, denigrate down to just being a production unit versus a person. And we really have to proactively talk about that, personalize it, and not just ask them questions. I think sometimes leaders do that, and it turns into feeling like an interrogation,
Oh, sure.
versus sharing, hey, I got to go sailing with my brother this weekend, or, I saw my grandson's, t-ball game. And so you share a little bit so that it opens the door as well.
No, that's great. And the Sergeant Major of the Army, Michael Grinston, he gave pointed out something in actually it was a commercial that I saw on the Armed Forces Network while we were deployed. But he said he's stopped just asking people, hey, where are you from? Or especially young soldiers, where are you from? Because that's a short answer and you can very easily move on from there. So he's maybe to build that connection, instead he's starting to ask people, how did you come up, or how did you grow up, or how did you get here? There's a story behind that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a great question is, I don't know much about you. Tell me a little bit about, what your life was like growing up, and they can go whatever direction they want, whether it's family or where they lived or what they did and that kind of thing.
Sure. Now, before we connected for this interview, you shared with me some of your thoughts on resiliency and the military. And one of the things that you highlighted is that one of the most consistent factors when you try to measure resiliency has been the existence of social support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what can you expand on that idea of social support and kind of what does that mean, and does that happen at work?
Yeah, I hope so. So yeah, so
that's kind of my job, right?
There's sort of a personal story. So, Chaplain, you know that one of my sons is an Army Reserve chaplain. He's now actually associate dean of the school for chaplains at Fort Jackson, but he served both in Iraq and Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, he suffered a traumatic brain injury from a mortar that came in and blew up right next to him. And so he went through all that and then wound up going on and getting his doctorate and studied actually the theology of resiliency, which is an interesting thing. But so he and I talked about this, and he did a whole social science, lit review of all this. And again, social support comes up, and it's because we need other people to get through tough times. Yes, we have our own personal relationship with God, but we're also sort of the hands and feet of God here on earth, and we just need that. And it's not that you're weak or whatever. It's just that we get tired, discouraged, whatever, and it's helpful to have somebody that say, "Hey, come on, let's keep going." And it's critical, and it makes a huge difference in sort of the perseverance of military personnel, soldiers and airmen and so forth, that they're part of a unit, and the whole band of brothers kind of story that you just don't do it on your own. And so we know when people hear and understand, part of our task is to help people understand how others want to be shown appreciation, so you can communicate it in a way that's meaningful versus, somebody likes quality time themselves, and so they stop by, see how you're doing, and quality time is like not on your radar. It's like, just leave me alone. So it feels weird when people try to do stuff that doesn't hit. So we want to help make it help people sort of hit the target with what they're trying to do, and then that creates a connectedness that allows them to support one another as they move through tough times.
Absolutely. I appreciate you, and I am here for you. There's a beautiful book by the Belgian Catholic priest Henri Nouwen that I think he wrote this book in the 70s, but the Wounded Healer, and he said it's communicating to people that I am here for you, and I will be here for you tomorrow.
Yeah, and it's important to note that I appreciate your example, but it's not words for everybody, right? For some people, saying it's like, doesn't mean much to me because they grew up in a context where people said stuff that they never followed through on. They're like, yeah, I heard that before. But for some people, it's just being there, right? You're there, you come and work alongside of them and get a project done, or and it can be active service that, you're overwhelmed, you're focused on a, short-term time limited project, and you're pushing hard, and it's like, what can they do to help out? Now, most people would, especially I live in the Midwest, and the upper Midwest, if you ask if you need help, they're always going to say, no, I'm good. That's just the cultural. And so you got to sort of push through that and say, no, really, I got some time. I'm glad to help you out. Is there something little that I could do to help make it better? And, sometimes you can get there and they'll say, well, yeah, if you did this. And it could be as simple as just sort of doing a couple of little tasks so you can stay focused on the big one. Or maybe that you may delegate a little part, or you say, hey, if you just go grab me a bite to eat and bring it in so I can keep working here at my desk. So, it's little stuff that really makes the difference.
Absolutely. That's a great reminder. Thank you for that. Well, Dr. White, the big idea for this podcast, Hope in the Trenches, is that we always have hope. And I believe that the military is an inherently hopeful activity, that what we do and what we're called to do gives the people in our communities, our nation, hope. And I saw that when I visited our soldiers and airmen who were working at the COVID vaccination centers around the state of Oregon. I saw that on a recent deployment to Kosovo, when 22 years after NATO began operations in Kosovo, our presence there still inspired hope in the people that we met. How do you define hope? And do you mind sharing what gives you hope?
Sure. So, hope is based in, I believe, the belief and desire, expectation that things are either going to stay good or get better and good results. And I think in this world that we live in, although we have times and periods where things are going well, I think we have to remind ourselves that this life isn't all that there is. I mean, and so the hope ultimately comes into there's more to life than just this, that I do have a creator, that I have purpose and meaning besides my time on earth. And that, I think, hope is the source of courage, actually, because why be courageous if there's no reason to sacrifice yourself or effort or whatever. And so to me, the flip side of it is without hope is anxiety, fearfulness, not knowing who's in control and what's up. And it's also apathy or discouragement. And we see an awful lot of that in our culture and in the military. And so, I think it's having that hope that in my belief, that Christ came to earth and lived here and died and rose again and said, I'm coming back to get you, and it's going to be pretty cool on the other side. And that also I get to live with him now. It's not just all about after death, but that, having his spirit in me and the body of Christ. So, it's in my faith is where my hope is, because whatever I do, work, it's here today, it's not going to be here too much longer, it just, we fade away and that's okay. It's part of life. But having that hope in sort of the spiritual nature of our life is where it's at for me.
Well, thank you for sharing that important reminder of, and that example of how your faith helps you to live confidently and courageously in the present. And we try to encourage everyone, and especially the men and women that we serve with in the military, that you can be courageous in your present circumstances, no matter what they are, knowing that you always have hope. I want to be respectful of your time, Dr. White, and so Major Chris Kerr, one of our great public affairs officer, has been listening in. And Chris, you've been listening to the conversation.
Yes.
What kind of questions do you have, or any thoughts on what you've heard?
Yeah, from what I've heard, I've been listening. Unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to read the book. I've been given it, and so I do want to look that over because I've read the love language book. But one of the things I was just thinking about that made me think from the conversation is there's two quotes from Napoleon, and while you guys were talking, I looked these up. I wanted to get them correct. And though, it might be a little cynical, these I do remember from, other training for leadership and whatnot. But they're from Napoleon, and one is, a soldier will fight long and hard for a piece of colored ribbon. And the other one is, give me enough medals and I'll win you any war. So in the military, we have one of the oldest professions. Can you kind of unpack from your study why medals are used worldwide for armies and the reason they've been the standard of recognition for so long in the military?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think the genesis of it is being recognized in front of your peers as well as your supervisors, that we're calling attention to, because, with a ribbon or award, a medal, there's a ceremony that goes along. My son just recently was awarded the Purple Heart, and there was very significant ceremony around that, both formal but also very personal. And people came from all over, because I think it's fairly unusual for a chaplain to get a Purple Heart, but came from all over because they wanted to be at the ceremony. And I think there's that aspect. But I think while Napoleon was a great leader in many ways, I don't think he understood all of the depths of mankind. And so I think there is that part, but, awards and ribbons don't get it for everybody. I mean, I've had people say, awards are cheap. Don't tell me you care, show me. And tangible gifts, which a medal is a kind of tangible gift, in our culture, only 6% of the population say that that's what they really want when they're showing appreciation. And I've had a number of people say, if I don't ever hear anything, if nobody ever stops by to see how I'm doing, if they never help when I need help, and they give me something, it feels pretty superficial. And I think that's the risk, and that's actually the problem with our reward and recognition programs, both in the private sector and, to be honest, in the military, is that it doesn't. The biggest comment is that it doesn't feel genuine. That it's just sort of a token kind of thing, very superficial going through. So we need to get at that personal level to help them feel valued and appreciated. And there's cultural aspects to it as well, but I think it can be a good thing, but just by itself, it doesn't seem to be getting it done.
Yeah, thank you.
The big idea is that validation and appreciation for who the person is and what they've been able to accomplish.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. White, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for sharing your son with us in the Army and in the military, and because that's a sacrifice by your family as well. And thank you for your work. So God bless you in your work, and I think you've got a great message, and I pray that resonates with a lot of people.
Yeah, thank you. And just so that people want to investigate more, we have a website. It's called appreciationatwork.com, and it's the word, it's not the at sign. And, we have these inventories that teams, it's a lot of people don't want to read a book. That's fine. But you can buy codes for your team members to take it. And we actually have training materials that we've had, both chaplains and resilience officers and I forget the name, family service officers take, and they take team members on their post and base through to try to help, because what we want to do is make it easy for people to learn how to do this. And it's cool to see as people apply it, and it makes a difference.
Absolutely, and it's gotten great feedback. And the 5 languages of appreciation in the workplace is an authorized curriculum through the Army Strong Bonds program. So we are getting this book in the hands of our chaplains here in Oregon, and I'm sure you can find it in other states as well.
Yeah, cool. Well, thanks very much. So much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. White. God bless you.
Thanks.
This podcast is produced by the Oregon National Guard Public Affairs Office. My prayer for you is that wherever you find yourself, that you might find hope for today and strength for the ambiguity and chaos of life. Blessings on the rest of your day.